Okay, first thing I'd ask you to do is take a look at the two questions. Just pause the video for a second and read through. Now, what you'll notice about these two questions is that they relate to the knowledge you will have developed around census and why we do census, as well as difficulties that countries can experience in gathering data on census. And the first question, I will explore a brief outline about how you would approach answering this relatively easy question, as well as how you might then approach the second question. So let's get started. In this first question, it establishes the fact that in this statement up here that we use a census to gather data, and that's conducted every 10 years, and we've been doing it since 1801. The question then says, describe how the UK gathers population data between these census and explain why it's important for countries to obtain accurate population data. So there's actually two questions in here, and I'll just take them both apart and have a look at both parts of the question. So the first thing is we're not being asked to talk about the census and how censuses are conducted and why they are good things. We're actually being asked about the other bits of information. How do we know about the population and how it's changing between census? So the first thing you'd want to say is that the registry officers across the United Kingdom gather data on all births, marriages and deaths, which ensures we've got reasonably up-to-date numbers certainly on the numbers of people being added to the population every year, as well as those that are leaving the population every year through death. So that's the first way we gather data. Second way is that the Office of National Statistics in London and the National Records of Scotland in Edinburgh also gather data on a regular basis using surveys, which are conducted every year and are a snapshot of the population where 2,000 to 5,000 people are surveyed in that particular year with various questions linking to their lives, where they live, and how various aspects of their lives are changing. And that allows them to estimate what is happening in the population across the country. Other methods of gathering data on a population can be done by local authorities who gather a range of information about people's lives, including they know about who lives in what housing and the state of housing in each area. The planning departments will have information about housing and who's living in what houses. They'll also have information about people's taxes and employment, because through council tax payments. They'll have educational data available from all of the schools in that authority about students' educational levels. And at local authority level, they can also access healthcare data through hospitals and GP surgeries in regards to overall averages of people with different illnesses and the general health within each local authority. So that is how we gather data in between census. Why is it important to obtain accurate population data? Well, first and foremost, the provision of things like medical services across the UK, medicine and the NHS being a very expensive part of our economy, does require effective use of data. So where is the greatest need in healthcare services? Where do we need to deploy more GP surgeries, more doctors, and potentially need to build new hospitals if there is an increase in population in an area, or potentially an increase in an aging population in an area that might require those medical services. We also need accurate population data if it's increasing in an area, because we need to ensure that enough housing is provided. Governments might need to then think about providing incentives to building companies to increase the amount of housing built in an area, or local authorities might indeed look to build more social housing if there's an anticipated increase in population in an area. Thirdly, if there is an increase in population, we might also need to think about education services. We might need to build more primary schools because there might be a high demand for primary places. More teachers might need to be employed in the next 4 or 5 years if they're predicting an increase in young people at primary age, or indeed at secondary level. And in some situations, projected population increase might then lead to the needing to build a school. All of these things need planned in advance because, of course, they need to be paid for. So when population change is happening in a country or across an area, then they might need to think about raising money, whether that be at a local level or at a national level, in order to pay for these increased needs. Finally, population data and population change does also allow more effective transport management. For example, if there's an increased population in an area, then there's likely to be increased traffic pressures in that area, which might need some kind of transport solution, whether that be more public transport or new roads being built. Okay, so in this tutorial, I have looked at this first question. in my second part of this tutorial, I'm going to deal with this second part to the question.